Well, hi there. Thanks for finding The Profitable Photographer with Lucy Dumas here on YouTube. If you want more, you can just go to any podcast channel and find the show or go to lucydumascoaching.com, Lucy with an I, to learn more about me and to listen to shows. And thank you for subscribing, sharing with your friends, and I hope you enjoy. Bye for now. I had to make my own living and my own opportunity, but I made it. Don't sit and wait for the opportunities to come. Get up and make them. That's a quote by Madam C.J. Walker. And she is recorded as the first female self-made millionaire in America. She made her fortune developing and marketing a line of cosmetics and hair care products specifically for Black women through this business. And there is a really great series, I'm not sure if it's Netflix or another one, about her life, and you might enjoy that. So I'm very excited to share Ron Nichols with you. He is currently now the owner of ProSelect. And if you've been around a while in this business, you know ProSelect is pretty much industry standard for doing great in-person sales. So I'm excited to talk to him about his recommendations for in-person sales and some other hot tips. Before I do that, I want to remind you to go to lucydumascoaching.com, Lucy with an I, and you can snag my book, 10 Big Ideas for Marketing in the Real World, and my PDF about attracting ideal clients. So they're similar, but different. Okay, so on with the show. I am just thrilled to have our next guest for this. Oh, Ron, the starting is always the hardest for me. Okay, here we go again. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to have Ron Nichols of the ProSelect studio software fame. I have worshiped him from afar, met him at trade shows year after year, where he has shared so much information about how to be successful selling photography and running a business. So here's a little background before I welcome Ron. Mr. Nichols has excelled in in-person sales long before that term IPS was coined. He graduated from college with an art degree and has owned a studio where he perfected his sales, both from the psychological and technological aspect. And I'm going to dig into both of those today. And he's worked with software companies to help develop applications that will optimize our sales efficiency and capitalize on that emotional aspect of sales, and then also helping with back-end workflow. He's worked for many top image makers, developing their sales process and workflow schemes. He is now the owner and CEO of Pro Studio Software Inc. Did I have that right, Ron? Yep. His work and service in the photography industry have garnered him many awards around the world. He's taught throughout the globe. He's a PPA International Juror Chairman, past PPA President, and member of the elite group, the Society of XXV. Is that 25?
25, yeah.
It's been a while since I learned my is it Greek?
Yeah.
Greek numbers. Yeah. So thank you so much, Ron. I'm super excited to have you here.
Thanks so much for all the kind words, Lucy. It's great to be here and share about something that I love talking about so much.
So can you briefly, you have a degree in art. So can you just give a little like cliff notes about how you got started in photography and decided that was your career goal and passion?
Yeah, kind of my background in photography actually started really before I ever really realized it. My dad was a marketing manager for, at the time, it was like the third largest engineering company in the United States. And so he was hiring photographers, or he had his department had a 35 millimeter camera that he would come home. So my dad was kind of a photo buff. Well, then I started out going on. Sometimes I'd go out on some shoots with him. I remember one in particular where they were photographing a large power plant, and how and the idea was to be able to show how a power plant can interact in a good way with the environment. So the whole shot was set up with my dad and I were the models, and I was probably about a dozen, probably 11 or 12 years old at the time.
A dozen years old.
Dozen years
That
old,
works.
yeah. Anyway, so, and I remember that the power plant had red and white stripes on the stacks that were going up there. And so I remember on the way to the shoot, we stopped at, I think it was probably Kmart, to buy me a red sweatshirt so it would coordinate with those stacks. And I later realized that really became my first clothing consultation for photography, as I think back on that. And so then over the years, I would do more. And the photographer that was actually on the job, I ended up being in Boy Scouts with his son. And then eventually in 10th grade, my dad bought me a Minolta camera that I started working with, and started doing this pictures of the school. Gave up sports or football and swimming, started working for the yearbook and newspaper, started working at a local camera store. Then I started working for the photographer from there. And photography is really all that I've ever done. Even in college, I was doing jobs and everything. So it's like I go way back. So,
So
quite a long history.
So yeah. So Ron, I was editor of my yearbook as well, and be very interesting to find out how many yearbook people went into a career in photography, because it's pretty common. I didn't photograph at the time. It scared me. It intimidated me. But later, I used a friend's camera and realized the potential, and bought my first camera, which was also a Minolta XG7. So
G7, I think that was newer than what I had.
When did you start? When did you?
I got that camera probably in about 1975.
Yeah, so I bought mine. Well, it was about then, 76, 77, somewhere around there. So
yeah, it was interesting at Christmas because my dad bought me this Minolta camera, or my parents, not my dad, of course, but and then my brother, who was a couple of years younger than me, they bought him a 30-06 rifle. And so we were both kind of shooters, but in a total different way. He was kind of into the hunting scene, and I was not. But what's interesting about all the journalism aspects of it is that, when I was in college and I was studying art and photography, all as a part of it, I had always told my girlfriend at the time, it's like, I'm never going to shoot portraits for a living. I was going to be the photojournalist, and I've got a minor in journalism, and so I was going down that path, but I was pretty clear that portraits were not where I wanted to go. But what I found is that ultimately that was my true love. I really enjoyed working with people, and the business evolved, from there.
I love that story. I thought that that journalism and fine art photography and models and such was real photography, and that having spent a good part of my career doing portraits was sort of a lesser. Do you know what I'm talking about? That feeling like I don't feel that now, but that the journalism was like the impressive, fantastic thing.
Right. That's kind of capturing these slices of life, where portraiture actually kind of creating and making it happen. But as we all know, it's a total different perspective, and where you evolve to and be able to pull this all together. And
Right. What I love, so I was talking to someone who started in photography as a portrait photographer, and then she did a few commercial jobs and ended up spending 20 years doing commercial photography, and regretted it because she felt like she wasted her life on something that was just in landfills. And my work, your work, the work that you help people in this industry, in the portrait weddings, they're treasured heirlooms. So yeah, I love that you found your passion in that way.
Yeah, I
Um,
did have a fairly extensive stint in commercial photography for a while. It started out that I mentioned that I was involved in the Boy Scouts, and so I started out working producing computer-controlled slideshows, these multi-image slideshows where you use multiple projectors. It would 3-channel cassette decks, and and you would record everything, computer signals on the tapes, and then it would control all these shows. I mean, it was really the big thing back in the '80s, and
oh yeah.
I had connected to a person who was later a business partner of mine, and so we would produce these different shows for scouting events. And then we actually produced one for the local Boy Scout Council. This was after I had gotten out of college. For the local Boy Scout Council for their pitch to United Way to secure their funding for the next year. And it so happened that the chairman of the board or CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan happened to be sitting on that committee. And he was like, wow, this is really amazing what you guys did. He said, would you be interested in producing some of these shows for Blue Cross and Blue Shield? So
Wow.
we started producing. These were shows that they would take in and do a pitch to the different unions, the auto plants around Michigan, different things to get people to sign up for the new HMO concept. This was when HMOs were very new. So we
Hmm.
started producing that, and then all of this then evolved into more advertising photography. I connected with a local
Hmm.
ad agency, or several ad agencies, but I had one that was major work that I did a lot of commercial work with that company. And what actually ended up driving me to the portrait part of it was actually cash flow, is really what it came down to. But so what
Hmm.
happened is that I was discovering that ad agencies were always kind of traditionally known as bad pay. You had to get
Right.
your money. I'd be waiting 90 days all the time. And, they'd call me up and say, hey, I need you to fly to New Jersey to photograph this commercial plant out there, on Friday. And I'm like, you need to lay about 10 grand on my account, and then I'll talk about going out there, and they would usually come through and do that. Well, in 1985, we moved to a commercial studio location in Grand Ledge, the town where I'm at right now. Previously, we just operated out of my business partner's basement. And so we moved to this commercial location. They were actually the space was already set up for multi-image production. That's what the company that did the build out on the space. And unfortunately, the owner got sick and died before the space was even finished out. So we went in and picked up the lease. And so what happened is now I had a real camera room to work in all the time. And
Hmm.
also then what happened is there was a beautiful presentation room in that one. So what we would do is, so I could have a bank of slide projectors up above in the studio, a 12-foot high ceiling in the presentation room. We hooked up motorized curtains on there, and that it would take that we could actually run a show. We could push a button, it would, on the tape deck, and it would automatically fire things to open the curtains, dim the lights. We put in all electronic lighting systems. Now, mind you, this was all in 1985, and that would run it and then run a whole multi-image slideshow. Well, what happened is this is what actually kickstarted me into IPS, because
Ah.
we began the whole process there, is that I was set up with a presentation room. And I've always had the philosophy that the presentation room, that if you're going to go out and you're going to rent a commercial space for a studio, the camera room is of least importance. The most important is the room where we actually going to do the selling and making the money. And I've always pretty much adopted that philosophy throughout my whole career. I guess what I'd like to share is that, okay, that we were taking that I was photographing weddings all the time when I was doing commercial stuff. And so at the time, I was a big follower of Monty Zucker, and some of the other greats that were out there in the industry. And I went out and I spent a few days with Monty He was doing one of his seminars. There was probably a dozen people or whatever. And so, you know, you're out shooting, doing everything that Monty would do. And then, of course, he'd talk about sales, and he was using slide projectors to do in-person sales for his weddings and making major money there using the Washington, D.C. market. Well, anyway, he went through the whole class of everything that was in there. The class all ended after it was all over, and some of the people were leaving, some were kind of hanging around there. I walked back to his office where he was sitting there, and I said, Monty, I said, I'm very intrigued with this sales process. And I said, I don't believe that you really told us the whole beans here on exactly the process that you take through when you're going through this process. So I kind of drilled down with Monty a little bit in terms of the process that was going through that he did on these weddings. And so what I did is I went back and I had a wedding on the following Saturday. Now, we'd always been using proofs like everybody else up to that point. What I did is I called these clients up and I said, I am so excited. I said, I just got back from studying with one of the top wedding photographers in the world. And I said, one of the things that we talked about and that I want to do for you is rather than have you look at tiny little proofs to make your selections for your images, what I'm going to do is we're going to have a party here. You're going to come into the studio, bring your family in. I said, one night, it'll probably take 3 hours, and we'll go through all of your images, and you're going to pick out everything for your albums and your loose prints and everything all that one night. And I said, the best part about this is, I said, I'm not even going to charge any more to do this. I'm going to keep all my
good.
And they were like, wow, you do that for us? And so what happened is at that point, I did the one, and I was nervous as could be, you know, going into what was really my first IPS session there. But that night, in the matter of that 3 hours, I sold $5,500 worth of photographs. Okay, so keep in mind, $5,500 in 1985, 1986, most people would be happy to get that on a wedding now.
Yeah.
And the highest wedding I'd ever done up to that point was 3,300. So from there, I absolutely never looked back. That this was now how my business was going to operate and how it was going to make me successful as a photographer.
Yes. So you were getting trans previews, the slide proofs?
Right, exactly. At that particular time, we were ordering the slide proofs. Yep, they would do the C41 processed film.
So since we've jumped into the sales and how because I'm like you, well, if I have a regret in my career, it's that I did projection sales for portraits and even the engagement sessions, but I still did paper proofs for weddings. And now on the occasion that I do a wedding, I do, slideshow sales, digital projector sales. And I'm just, kick myself for not doing what I already knew how to do. I didn't have anybody mentor me on the wedding. So I didn't ever take a 2-day, 3-day class with Monty. So anyhow.
What's crazy with people when they look back on what they could have done is when you take and you figure the amount of money that you've left on the table.
Oh my gosh.
Whether it be 3 months, a year, or 10 years, those numbers are absolutely huge. And so that's why we always want to take and move forward with this, and you need to just do it and get moving with it.
Right. Consistently, I've seen people over the course of my career finally break down and get a projector, and their first sale pays for the whole thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Or 2 or 3 back when a good digital projector, a decent digital projector, was still $3,500 or something. It still paid for itself really quickly. So I know that you both are a genius, or your zone of genius is both the psychological aspect of sales and the technical side. So could we talk about the psychological aspect first? I'd love to get your take on selling.
Well, ultimately, what it comes down to is the biggest failure that I see out there with photographers is that they don't give their clients the opportunity to buy. And by what I mean by that is that they're not actually, they don't have the confidence level to go out and actually make the suggestions to be able to take and drive them, to be able to take it. So it's now pretty easy because with tools like ProSelect, for example, that you can build up a wall grouping in their room and show them, okay, the client can get the idea. Okay, back when we were using slides, we could project it, we could project a 16 by 20 or 30 by 40 by moving our slide projector in and out, but we couldn't put that image into a room. Now we have lots more capabilities. So people need to be able to take and give the customers the opportunity to buy. So that's the big key, and have the confidence to do it. Then the other factor that comes in is I always believe that people need to have a systematic sales approach. And this is something
Okay.
that I have always taught.
Ron, I want to stay with psychological for a minute. So what I'm hearing is your take on the psychology is about the photographer having the confidence, and that it's easier now because even just doing a system and showing room views or some other way for people to visualize, having a projector, showing it big, that the photographer can feel more confident in doing the sales. Is that what you're saying?
Well, exactly. They have that. Those become the tools. Okay. So we have to, psychologically, we have to have the confidence to be able to do that, the opportunity to be able to show the client, the confidence to be able to ask for the sale and to be able to say the numbers it's going to be. But then we also have to take and cater our presentation psychologically in a way to think of how they create a movie. Okay, that you go to the theater and you watch a movie. What happens is everything is done within a movie to be able to take and control your emotions. And so in a movie that you're going to take and that you'll have the background music plays a significant role. There's different things that they will take in a movie to be able to take so that you're going to have touchy-feely type moments, then you're going to have excitable moments, then you might have calm, cool things, then you will have things that will take and bring you back. And in the same way, you need to be able to take and cater a presentation to be able to kind of almost mimic that same type of thing. And so what happens is that as I'm working with a client, we need to be able to take and we need to put the client into an emotional state. We need to move them to an analytical state to be able to actually make decisions, but then we have to move them back to an emotional state to be able to close the sale, because quite often that when we're dealing with high numbers in IPS, that on a logical sale, it's probably not going to happen. But when we put them into an emotional state, that's where we can actually control. I don't know if control is the right word, but to be able to get them to purchase based on what they're feeling as opposed to what they think they need or want.
How do you move them back? Because I know the slideshow, as you just shared, it sets that emotional grounding. And then there's the, let's edit down to our favorites, I assume is the logical. And then how do you get them back to the emotional purchase at the end? Or do you want to go more into detail?
Sure, absolutely. So
on the whole process.
Yeah, what it is that again, the typical process is, first of all, I have an overall concept of, I'll tell you my selling order. The process that we go through is that the first thing that we're always going to start out with doing a slideshow first. Then we're going to move into being able to take and make selections on the images to be able to remove any images that they don't like. Then we focus on wall portrait sales, and we stay focused on wall portrait sales until one of two things happen. Either they purchase a wall portrait or multiple portraits, or you get a flat out no. Then from there, the next thing that we're going to sell is we're going to sell essential photographs. Now, what I consider essential photographs are going to be gift type prints, photographs for parents, grandparents, different things, different images like that. A lot of people tend to forget those anymore. And they are such a profit center that, that for years I was selling 8x10s for $150 a piece. And so there's a whole lot of profit in there. And when you can start adding 2, 3, 4, 8x10s at $100 or $150 a pop, that increases your order. Then the last thing that we would go into is selling what I call frou-frou products. And frou-frou products are going to be multi-image composites, albums, books, other things. But I want to come back to that one in a minute, Lucy. Okay, so we'll come back to that. So now back to your original question, because the sequencing is so important. So what happens is that we'd always start out the slideshow with the presentation with a slideshow. So we're setting the nice tone. The images are up on the big screen. They believe are digital projectors over TVs. So they're going to view all the images. So we've got them in an emotional state at that particular point. One of the things that's important is I always tell them that we don't want to take and worry about making any selections when they look at the slideshow. Just sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Then from there, we're going to go through and we're going to do our yes, no, and maybes. And clients are under the perception that they're going to be going through these images multiple times, that they would take it's my belief that you really have to go through the images once and you can make all of your decisions that way. I could go through weddings and the clients would think that they're going to go through and do all these iterations of cuts and cuts and cuts. No dice, one time through, and we can do it. You handle the sale correctly, you can do it. So what happens is they're going to go through and they're going to edit down. We're going to edit down to their images that they love. Then the only other thing that we're going to take out of there at that point is we're going to take out our duplicate images. So if I've got two head and shoulder portraits, maybe the eyes are a little different or just a little bit different, slightly different, on a direction of the head or something, I'm going to take those out. So I essentially have no duplication in there. Then at that point, what I'm going to do is in ProSelect, I can just hit the quick slideshow button. And so what that does is now I'm going to take, and I'm just going to have just those images that we've elevated to that yes group at this particular point. And I'm just going to kick it into a slideshow again. So what happens now is that I can take that using the ambient music mode in ProSelect, my background music just fades out. My images go into the scene. It doesn't, when a quick slideshow, it's not going to have any titles, but then it just shows the images. So it'll go through there and that reverts it back into to help get them out of that analytical state back into an emotional state. Then after they've looked at that images, maybe it's going to be 10, 12, maybe it'll be 30, depending on whatever the job, maybe it's 40 images. Whatever it is, we're going to do that. Then the question I ask is, which of these images do you envision being displayed in your home as a wall portrait? And at this point, I don't want to sit there and I don't want them kind of going through the images. I want things that certain things will rise to the top in your mind. And that's how they're going to, that's how I want them to take and do it. And then based on that is how I'm going to evolve from there in terms of building up the rooms and doing different things that way with the client. But by being able to take and toggle between selection processes and building processes, bringing it back in with music, we can do a whole lot of that, controlling the emotion.
So so my process is very similar, and I love hearing that we're on the same page. I discovered a little trick. Can I share that with you?
It's your show. Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So I was really happy when you added the ability to make sets in the ProSelect program, because what I do after we've narrowed exactly what you just said, yes, no, maybes, and then just the ones that are super similar, then I place them in high potential, wall, small, or album potential. And I do a slideshow of just the wall group, and I run through it twice. And I say, we've been doing a lot of thinking. Now we want to go back to emotion. So you and I are on the same page with that. And I want you to notice which ones give you a really special feeling, or which ones touch your heart. And you'll feel that the first time and the second time. And if you purchase that as art for your home, that's what you're going to feel for the rest of your life every day. And that, Ron, is why I hold the record at Mid-South for the most number of wall portraits per client. 3 to 8 is the range, more like 6 or 7, because I'm planting that really strong seed that they're going to get to feel this feeling over and over and over again. So yeah, anyway, just a little tip to pass on to people is I like to separate them out into those sets, and also them seeing the word wall and small or gift and album is also planting a seed that they're going to be purchasing all of that. So yeah. And I might have even, it's highly possible, I got the idea of doing that second show from you, watching you at a trade show teach, because I was like, when did I start doing that? And when did I decide I'm going to run through it twice? So anywho, so continue. So
Yeah, just one thing I
how do
can
you
just
then,
point out
go
that
ahead.
last year I was a platform speaker at Imaging USA. It was virtual, but I did a very, very comprehensive produced program on the portrait sales presentation. And that is that's available in the PPA EDU session.
Mhm.
It's about an hour-long session where I take you through the whole processes of doing a sale. And then it's also available on the Pro Studio software, the ProSelect
Great,
website. It's accessible there too.
great. And that would be worth joining PPA. The cost of a year-long membership would be more than worth it just to watch that program. So, Ron and I are huge fans of the Professional Photographers of America. So if you have not joined and you're in America, I imagine you would highly recommend that. Am I right, Ron?
Absolutely. They have lots of international members too. So
Oh,
you don't even
okay,
have to be in
good.
America.
I am happy to hear that. I
Oh
did
yeah.
not know
Yeah.
that for sure. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so they're focused on the wall sales, and then what happens?
So what we're going to do is we're going to go through and we're going to take and we're going to work on the sale. And ideally we want to take and we want to design for the space. And so when I explain to clients, we want to be able to, there's a couple different factors that involve the selection of a wall portrait. First of all is we need to be able to get something that's appropriate for the space. So we don't want to put a small image in too large of an area. So we
Mhm.
need to be able to count for that. Then what we have is, that's what I refer to as visual space. Okay, then the other factor we need to deal with is actually head size. And the way that the head size is, we want to be able to have it so that when you're sitting in your chair in your home, you can look up the wall and you can enjoy the expressions on your children's faces. You can see what's going on in the portrait. It shouldn't be a wall portrait. It shouldn't be something that you have to walk up to see. You want to be able to enjoy it. And my presentation room was always designed in such a way. I mean, my presentation room was, I think, 17 and a half feet wide and 23 feet long. It was designed, it's probably about the size of my living room here in
Mm.
my home. And that was very, very intentional, with a fireplace and everything. So that you could do it. So we want to take and we're going to use those two factors. And so what we can do is we can use room view to be able to take and show it, to be able to see how it works within the visual space. Then by just
Mhm.
simply clicking the little eyeball in ProSelect, we can go to select size view. I'm sorry, we click the ruler icon and from room view, and it takes you directly to select size view, and you can see those images displayed actual size, again, assuming your screen is big enough. And this is where I love a projector, is because it gives me a much larger area to work with. So I can show a 30 by 40 and two
Mm.
430s, all actual size. And then I click that eyeball again and it goes right back in the room. So the client can get an idea,
Oh.
a visual. So it becomes a toggling back and forth. And I
Ah.
explain that process to the client. So what happens is that we're going to take and we need to get commitment at that point of what they're actually going to go with. And what I consider as a commitment, when we actually take and we add that to the shopping cart. Then from there, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about possibly any other areas in the home. And so we're going to talk about if they submitted maybe through Send My Rooms, various other rooms in the house, we can take and we can have those to be able to work with and look at other alternatives. But all the time and through this whole selection process, I'm thinking and I'm giving guidance of where we're going to go. And I kind of
Mhm.
have all those things, a lot of them pre-planned in my head is how it's going to go. One of the things that I didn't mention early on is that whenever I start a presentation, once I do the initial slideshow, is I look at the client and say, as we go through these, we're going to go through and start making the selections. And do you mind if I give you my opinion too?
Mm.
And you just ask and then you shut up.
Oh, I like
And
that.
then what happens is, and believe me, I've never had a client tell me, no, they don't want my opinion. And the thing is what that does is that allows me to be able to take and have more interaction, that if I feel a client missed something, I can tell them they missed it. If there's something
Mhm.
that I don't want in there because maybe I missed something technically, I will pull it out of there. I can also take. And if I see something that where I always want to position myself in the presentation room. So I'm not looking at the screen, I'm looking at the client. So I can have that constant eye contact. I don't need to see the screen. I've got a computer screen in front of me. So what happens is then I can take that if mom, there's two images, the clients, I'm comparing duplicates. The client doesn't know what they look like, or the client's kind of unsure one to the other, they start looking to each other. I can read that if I'm watching that client. And so I can jump in and say, you know what, I think this one's a yes. And I also think that one's a no. And it's important as you go through the process that everything is not a yes. You have to get the number of images down to a manageable count to be able to close the sale. And that is just a huge fail on the part of photographers, is they go in there, they love everything, they don't guide it down to a manageable situation where they can actually close the sale.
Yeah. I've one of my coaching clients has been doing a great job of the sales process that's similar to yours. And she hired someone to photograph her family. And she wasn't looking for a discount. She wanted the full experience. And her experience of working with this photographer that didn't have a system, didn't project, didn't have a system, didn't get down to a manageable size, and then was afraid to even ask for the money. Like, she would have spent $3,000 to $5,000 if the system had been set up right. So it was interesting to hear someone who knows and uses this the system of how to have a great sale, see why it works, why she went from $500 sales to $1,500 to $3,000 quickly by projecting and by being organized. So I love what you're sharing about the steps and the importance of having that, what did you just say, the narrowing down, and not just, here's a whole bunch of stuff, what do you want?
Right.
So, did that make any sense, what I just said?
Absolutely. Yeah. The whole thing that I think my whole photographic career is I spent most of it designing systems. I want to be able to create repeatable processes. The one thing that I found with photographers is, in most cases, most people are looking for a shortcut. Okay, if you read sales books, they have all these various different psychological approaches and analyzing the customers and all that kind of stuff, and I kind of decided, I'm probably not that smart. So I need to develop something that can be repeatable, and that if I have a salesperson in my studio, I can teach them that. If I go into location to work with somebody, I can teach them that. And so when you go through and that you have this process in place of this, slideshow, edit, wall portraits, close, essential portraits, close, frou-frou products, close, that you closed in segments. And so by doing that, what that does is that makes it so that we're not taking and we're not presenting the client's not going to be totally blown away at the number at the end, because we've gone through that. Now, I don't speak a lot of numbers when I'm in that presentation, but I always have a price book right in front of the client. So for example, if I'm showing a 30 by 40 on the screen, I'm going to have that price book will be sitting there, and I'm going to tell the client, you can see over on the left-hand side, the canvas print of this particular size is the fourth one down on the list. And notice how that the 30 by 40 was the fourth down on the list, that I had larger sizes up above that, so they don't feel like they're buying the farm, because we all know that people buying into the middle. So what that does is that has the price book in front of them. They're able to look at it, and they can follow the line across, and they can see the price, and it's all there. And so it's no surprises. Okay, prices always seem less if you're not verbalizing. And all of a sudden, once we start verbalizing the numbers, then they appear to be much larger than probably what they really are. So this close process, I'm very upfront. I would always go through pricing and pre-session consultations with clients. I never wanted to take and blindside a client, because I put too much work into creating a session and preparing for it to have them to go, oh, I can't.
So you're planting seeds, and you're giving it. You're not like, here, come in for a consultation, let's book it, and then later you're relying on the pictures in the sales system. You're planting those seeds. You're clarifying what kind of investment they might be looking at. Do you have them bring in the room views ahead of time, or send them to you and give them some ideas of, like, I think this size works on this? Do you do some of that?
Yeah, I think that you can, the earlier you can get room views, it's better. It's going to give you an advantage as a photographer. That I haven't been now in the studio on a regular basis. I mean, we owned a studio up until just this last June or last January, and we sold our building. My wife's been running the studio. I've been involved in all the other aspects of my businesses. But anyway, as far as on there, I think you can get them earlier. But one of the things, whenever a client would call the studio, if they call you, text you, email, the first question you got to ask is, where are you planning on displaying a portrait in your home? And because what it does is that stimulates conversation. And that then what we can do is then from there we can take and we can evolve with a client. We can say, well, tell you what I'd like to do is that I want to have you, I mean, I can check availability for you to see something, but I don't really want to take and set up a time for your session or have either one of us to commit to a session until, you know, we've had a chance to be able to meet and make sure everything feels right. And so what I'd like to do is have you come in. We're gonna we'll go through a consultation. We're gonna be able to talk about where you plan on displaying portraits in your home. And then when we get there, I'm going to start, if I don't have the pictures, I'm going to start talking colors. Well, tell me a little bit about your home. Where were you thinking of putting this? Oh, your living room. Well, is your living room, is it contemporary? Is it traditional? Is it kind of an eclectic mix? What is it? Then what are the colors? So what's your primary color that you use in there? Well, beige, you know. Then, well, what's your accent color? Well, kind of beige. Well, I assume you have a sofa. Or what color is the sofa? What color are the accent pillows? These type of things are all questions that I could take to evolve to be able to start creating a color palette to be able to take to talk it through the clients in terms of colors to be able to take and evolve that portrait. So it's you know, and the seed begins with that, where do you plan on displaying a portrait in your home?
Got it. And if they say on the mantle in an 8x10 frame, I imagine you have some great follow-ups on that aren't just like, oh, okay, like
absolutely,
what's a response to that?
Absolutely. The mantle of the piano is a beautiful place to, you know, display a gift size print. But I also think it's important that we take, and that when we create this portrait, we're going to go through, it's going to be a lot of work on not only my part, but also you're going to be working far harder in this process, getting everything together, the people, the clothing. And so what we really want to do is want to make sure that even though that's, you're just thinking a small portrait there, that it fits your space.
I love it.
So I can't tell you the amount of times that people came in with the intention of purchasing a wall portrait and they ultimately ended up with a 30x40 because we created for their space, we created with them. I never felt bad about clients going out and buying all new clothes, getting grandma to go out and buy new clothes for everybody in the family. You know, some people say, oh, I don't want them spending that money. It's like, oh, I want them to go out and spend a ton on that because now they're part of the process and they're involved in it.
Right. So I've had a recent ponderance about if somebody is ready to book on the phone, is there a reason I might not want to steer them that way and give them more pricing and details? So what is your thought about that? If somebody, like I have somebody that that I'm mentoring, where she gets good steady bookings and decent sales on the phone, but to me my process is always to get together first, and I love what you just said, make sure it's a fit. Anyway, so I'm going to ask the question and then shut up. What are your thoughts about pre-booking if they're ready?
Well, what we can do is the way that I would approach it is that I would say that what we can do is we can go ahead and let's put a tentative time on the date for a session. But really what's important is that we need to get together so we can talk. And so, you know, that we can do this. I prefer you come into the studio so you can take, and it'll give you better opportunity to be able to see our work, be able to see the finishes and the different products that are available. But if you can't do that, we can make this work. We can do it as a Zoom meeting and be able to communicate that way. But that that the process of us talking through this and doing some pre-planning is just a real critical part of the creative process. And so I need that to be able to really create something spectacular for you and your family.
Perfect. So you might pencil in tentative. Would you take a payment or just say, sure, let's tentatively set up here, but let's get together first to make sure it's a fit and go over details and pricing and get some ideas and clothing? Like, what's your suggestion on that?
You can get me off on a tangent on this one.
Yeah, well, this has just been a hot question in my mind, so I really appreciate your tangent.
Well, I think that what's happened with photographers anymore is I think that they have, and it comes down to things from their confidence levels to, I mean, I think clients are a part of this, but you know what, the thing is that, I mean, I would always secure payment at the consultation, because again, I want it to be right. I sit there and I see these photographers doing these extensive session contracts, and I am just blown away. I am just blown away at that, and then they're taking and they're wanting to go after people, for all this stuff. And I'm like, seriously, we're in a customer service business. We want to be able to create, that if you go through the process, the client, and treat them right, you can do this and get them into a comfort level. I mean, I guess contracts are important in business, but you still have to be realistic about everything. I want to be able to take, and I mean, whenever I did weddings over the years, on the ones that once I got out of my NEBS contract, those pre-printed contracts,
I use that.
You know what that is. You and I are the only ones out here, Lucy, that remember those.
I use that too. Yes.
But the thing is that I would just do a letter of engagement, that I would send the client a letter that would be outlining everything. And that's the way that I always work. And so I don't want to take, and I would much rather take and, not have a client give me money than pay me money and then come in the consultation and then have to give it back.
Give it back.
And I was probably much more capitalized than what most of the photographers that are out there now, that all of a sudden, if you're a small operation, that if you have to take $100, $200, $250, everybody's always robbing Peter to pay Paul, that you're paying, that session fee that you collect is the one that's paying your lab bill on that order that's coming in, because you already spent the money for the pictures. So the thing is, it makes it hard to be able to give it back. And I just found that over the years that you have to know when to cut a client loose. I need to tell people, there's people that I've done in sessions, that, hey, I don't think this is the right fit, but I think maybe you'd be comfortable for it, and I'll make a recommendation with somebody I don't like to send them to. Now, or somebody that's that, and I've learned that with ProSelect, and there's people out there that are just not worth the trouble. It's like, you know what?
Yeah.
This isn't the right fit. Let me just give you your money and you go your own way, and somebody else can serve you better.
Yeah, but we'd rather, so I love, that's a great point, because part of why I want to have a consultation before I book it is to make sure I want to work with them.
Right.
If they're all in on the phone and, sounds like they've got the money and blah, 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 but then I meet in person and I just get a bad feeling, I find a way to like tiptoe backwards, not physically, and be like, well, that's great. So why don't you go home and think about it? And, and it's hard to do that if you've already taken the money. So, and I think that's one of the big shifts that when people realize that they are interviewing a client to see if they are who they want to work with, and it's not just about trying to sell the client on working with them, that it's a two-way street. I think that's when people's income increases, the people that they work with are more fun, they have more confidence because it's people that know, like, and trust them. So yeah, good stuff.
Well,
I want to segue into workflow, but I want to
just hang on,
see if there's
hang on a
any.
second. Just one thing I want to say is when you're working with a client, that if the client starts tossing out a lots of buts or what ifs, okay, that's probably a red flag.
Right.
Okay, it's like, well, but what if I do this? Can I get this? What if, on this, on digital files, or that they start tossing out all these different scenarios that are outside of your standard policies. And policies are something that are essential that you need to have, and they need to be written down. So, and the one thing that's important whenever you take and that you get into, I don't know if adversarial is the right word with a client, but the thing is that whenever I'm explaining the process to a client is, or the reason why they say, well, why can't you just do this? And so the reason I can't do this is because every year I sit down with my accountant and I sit down with my business consultant and my lawyer. And what we do is together, we all establish the policies that are going to make this business successful. And it's important for me to have my business successful because my family depends on me providing a livelihood. And so in order for me to do that, and so that my family can enjoy the same type of things that you enjoy, and I can write those checks to Michigan State University and everything that's also involved, I have to trust their judgment and adhere to these policies in my business. So what I'm doing there is I'm deflecting this all to outside professionals, that it doesn't become me. It becomes that the business kind of becomes an entity, outside people, and I've related it to an emotional aspect that they can understand, because I said terms like just like you, the things that you want to enjoy with your family, my family deserves that too. Sorry, I know I kind of go off on different things.
No, I love it. I love it. Accountant, lawyer, and what was the third
Business
one?
consultant,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, this yesterday, in a coaching call, we had that exact scenario, and she was trying to respond because last year you did it this way and I don't like it, and I wanted you to know. And I was trying to come up with, like, we don't want to make excuses, but we want to say these are the business practices that this year I realize is best for my business. But I love what you're saying is deflecting it to my accountant, my lawyer, my business consultant have analyzed my business. And these are how my policies, my pricing to support my family, just like you. I love that. I love that. I'm going to listen to that again a couple times to just get that, those words, those thoughts really clear, and the deflecting. So it's not because no one cares, like, oh, prices are up and this is like, do you know what I'm saying? Is exactly. When you say it as like, oh, this is what I need, is different than these are what my advisors say is the best for my business so that I can have the life that I want to lead, basically. I love it. I'm kind of babbling, but brilliant.
I think
I love it.
As we go through this with a customer, that we need to be able to take that, the big thing is when you're transitioning into IPS, that you have a past clientele and you have to decide, okay, can I move these people, or do I have to just plain let them go? And so when you do get the questions is, well, what about last time? And you can just look at them and say, you could say, look at how much different the world is this year from what it was just a year ago. Technologies have changed. People don't go to work anymore. I mean, we deal with things across Zoom meetings. Everything evolved. And so I have to reevaluate my business. And again, I do this with my professionals. And quite honestly, what happened is when I really started looking and got serious about business, I found that I had an unsustainable business model. I couldn't be successful in business doing what I was doing. I understand it was great for you, but the problem is I couldn't provide for my family that, and I'm sure you understand how that puts pressure on me. And so I have to be able to be successful. So not only can I do your kindergarten pictures, but I can do your senior portraits and your daughter's wedding down the road.
Right. And their grandchildren.
Absolutely.
Well, I love that. Because so many people I see that are transitioning from shoot and share, or what I call post and pray, which is you post it online, cross your fingers, hope they buy anything.
Because after they've sprayed and prayed.
Yeah, yes. um, is they have clients that they've loved, and it's so hard for them to say, well, I'm no longer doing this business model. So I love what you're saying, that with people where you can, in a warm way, say to them, yes, I was a great deal for you over the years that you've worked with me, but I realized it wasn't sustainable. And besides that, I want to give more service and blah, blah, blah. In order to be around for decades, I've needed to make this change. I love that.
What surfaces through all this is that you have to be real and you have to be honest with your clients. You have to be able to sit there and say, hey, I wasn't successful. And that's a lot of humble pie to be able to eat.
Yeah.
Okay. But if you do it, the client will take, because you're saying that from the heart. It's like, I think even just, if I sit here, it almost chokes me up to sit here and say, think about, the times when I was not successful in business and how it becomes, to be able to take and engage with a client on that level and build a real relationship. And that relationship is going to help capture everything in these portraits, because we're all creatives and, most are not business people, and it becomes, it's a challenge. So be upfront, be honest, and be real. That's going to go a lot further than any contract is ever going to go.
And being real is different than like excuses. That there's a different energy about, well, I have to do this because prices have gone up, and but that deep honesty that you just shared, that I was not reaching my goals, I was not being successful, I was working myself to death for very little money. And so yeah, thank you for that, Ron. That is huge.
Justification is analytical, honesty is emotional.
Ooh, quotable quote. Oh, so I want to move on. I know you're also the king of workflow. So what do you mean by workflow? And yeah, let's talk about that.
Well, workflow is one of these things that I've studied and been involved with my whole career. Is when it's been through IPS, I've been through every iteration of IPS possible, whether it was I'm kind of going back here a little bit, but you think about that, people are now talking about, oh, I'm doing IPS and I'm doing proofs. Okay, well, I knew when I worked in a studio in 1979, we did proofs and they got you by, but they didn't excel in your sale. So I've been through proofs, and I've been through proofs in an astroscope. Then we've done slides, and we've done the inoscopes. We've done the photovixes. Then we these whole processes.
Okay,
so they've all evolved throughout the years.
Yes.
And through all of these processes, I've had to take and deal with different workflows. And so what we have to do is we have to create, again, a systematic approach. And I've used that term before, is I need to be able to take and create a repeatable process that can happen very easily within the studio. And I've done this because I've been hired as a consultant many times all over the country to work with people. And the biggest, what happens is that if people do not have a repeatable process in place, as soon as they lose an employee, they feel like they're hosed. They like they're hosed. And so we need to be able to create a process that's simple. A lot of speakers and I think even, some consultants out there, they like to share how smart they are. I don't, my whole thing is, it's not, I don't believe it's how smart I am. My whole thing is I'm going to take and I'm going to dumb down your process so simple that anybody can do it. And that's ultimately my goal. That's why I want, when I get in the sales room, I want that systematic process so that every time you go in there, if you do that process and do nothing else from what this conversation today, or that same process I outlined in that IUSA video I did, it will take, and it will mean thousands of dollars if you just do exactly what it is. Then the same way on the workflow, and where photographers fail to think is that they don't think that workflow is something that's going to save them money.
Right.
But it is.
Now, so Ron, I want to interrupt you for 1 sec.
Okay.
Are we talking about workflow? Like my former husband was a production control specialist for solar turbines. And when he explained what he did, I realized I'm a production control specialist as well, because I have to have a system where I find the client, take the pictures, do the sale, and then I have to have a workflow where I follow through all the steps until I can do the sale and then edit and order and deliver and all of that. So when you say workflow, are you talking about all of the studio management, or are you talking about the sales workflow?
No, I'm talking about the whole studio process. I'm talking about.
Got it.
But
okay.
There needs to be a situation from as soon as you take and your thumb flips that little door in the back of your camera and you pull out that SD card. Okay, from that point on, there has to be a process. And so what happens is that when that card goes and it hits the computer, we have to know exactly where those files are going to go, how they're going to get renamed. And when those files are going in there, they're going into a static location. But there's going to be an automatic process that's going to take and write another set of those files, an archive set of files, to another drive. So that if when you do something stupid, which we've all done, okay, yes, you're going to take and you've got another set of backup files. Okay, this is going to be a process that's going to happen all automatically, that you're going to go from there. Then from there, we're going to work through everything in terms of preparing the ProSelect presentation. Then once the customer job is sold, from there, what we do is that we're going to take, and then we have to be able to take and be able to find the images, to be able to take and retouch. Okay, so now we've got an order out there, and you got an order, you've got 30 images that you need to take and you need to work on. I mean, people are sitting there and they're going through they're opening up their files. First of all, they're trying to find where their folder is for this job folder, because they can't remember where they put it. And then they're going to go through and they're going to start looking at the sheet and trying to look at numbers and trying to find all these folders. And they're going to take and they're going to move them over into another folder that's going to say to be worked on or something like this. Well, now we've got 2 copies of these files out there. So now as soon as we move those files, we've now lost links to our original files out there. We need to be able to take and have the process so that we can take that, when I take it, if I'm going to take and if I'm using ProSelect, for example, I have my order, my clients that place the order in there. I want to outsource your retoucher. All I have to do is go to production, produce production package. It'll gather up all the files, to compile all the notes into a README file, put it together, write it to a folder that I can outsource to a retoucher. Literally takes me 15 seconds to do that, where people are spending all kinds of time trying to go through and do this. They get the files back from there, they drop those files back into ProSelect, and they tell it to replace the existing files that were on the system. They go back into the same original source folder, and you click Run Production. It goes through, does all the cropping, makes all the final files, writes the quantity of each image into the file name, and all you have to do is you go to whatever lab you want, and you open up rows, and you upload your files. I mean, people are spending hours and hours doing all of this stuff. They do all this manual process. They're images in and out of Lightroom, in and out of ACR. Their color management is not right. There's also enough video out there in PPA's education system on color management too. I did, or on calibrating your monitor, and why it's important. But the workflow is the step-by-step process to be able to get through there. And what happens is that I've been involved with ProSelect for probably since about 2005, 2004. So that's what, 16, 17 years that I've been involved with ProSelect. And and ProSelect was created by engineers. It was not by one of the engineers' wife was a photographer, but not to the league that I play with. And and so they designed it. So over the years, I've been able to take and guide the whole process and be able to take and that I can go into a studio, and I go into a studio that's got, 7 photographers and a dozen workstations and, all this type of stuff, and be able to extract what they got. Then I work with somebody else, who's in their home office. Then I work with, a studio out in Las Vegas that owns 14 locations. And you can take, and with this knowledge, you've been able to take and build in all these different systems and processes that you can take that are all integrated back into ProSelect, believe it or not, to be able to take and to be able to handle all of these situations. And,
Nice.
and that's been, and what happens is ProSelect can become the center hub. People take, and I'm not trying to turn this into a ProSelect commercial, but what happens is that people take when they go out there. If you ever look out on the forums when people are out there looking for something, they say, "What do you suggest?" "I'm looking for something like ProSelect." Okay, and what that is code for I don't want to spend the money on ProSelect. Okay,
Right.
because they think it's just a room view thing. And that is not the case, and that is not the case at all.
Right.
And
Right.
so anyway, so we've so in ProSelect we've done the development on these things. We've got, I had to have the Ron Nichols Studio Retouching Palette, which is a product that I originally released the first version back in 2005, and then we released again in 2009. And I still have people that are using that 2009 version out there because it's a systematic approach to portrait retouching using Photoshop. And we're in the process of redeveloping that whole product now. I created a whole nother product as a backup and import utility for offloading your camera card. So it'll send everything in the right way, gets everything in the same place. But people are just I look at these setups on people and it just makes my head spin and go, how did you think of making this so complex when we can do one thing? If we retouch a file, you open up a file, you retouch it, you don't even have to crop it. Okay, just retouch the file, and then you open up the raw file, you save it as a TIFF file, and you put it right back in the original directory, right next to where the JPEG is. Okay, and when I look at a file that's got a TIFF file, that's got a TIFF extension on it, I know that that file is completely retouched. Okay, flattened TIFF file. If I see one with an extension in there that's got a PSD file, that's going to be probably either an intermediary file or it's going to be a file that's got layers on there. If I've got my JPEG file, that's my original image that was used strictly just for viewing only. So everything is all in that same place that I can take. If I open a JPEG file, I can click something, I can open up a raw file immediately from that. If I process in Lightroom, if I set up my Lightroom correctly, I can pass off the XMP data to be able to travel with that file. So when I go from ProSelect, I can open up an Adobe Camera Raw. It gives me all my Lightroom processing data and back up to a first generation file, retouch it, save it, tell ProSelect to update, everything is linked. I mean, it's just, that's what workflow is. And it's very comprehensive. And
right. Well, and I'm imagining the overall concept of having a system that works, that's simple and repeatable. Like one of the reasons I don't enjoy Lightroom is the import, export. I could never quite figure out, well, where are my things? So I'm more of a Bridge Adobe Camera Raw fan because I have my files in a hard drive that I'm working with, and I can just open it up and it is automatically, I don't have to export anything. So am I right in whether you use ProSelect or something else, that you're a big advocate of having a system and having it be repeatable and simple?
Well, it is. That's what it comes down to. It all has to be a system. For example, on your Lightroom, for example, I like using Lightroom on the front end in terms of prepping the files prior to the presentation, but I prefer using ACR on the back end. Okay, and you have to set everything up so that they communicate. Okay, because I can do a much more seamless thing with Adobe Camera Raw. It's the exact same interface as Lightroom. All the dials and everything are all exactly the same. It's just a different look to the screen to it. Right. But all my Lightroom data is passed right from there, and so I can go right from ACR, then I click it, open, I'm in Photoshop, retouch, save as TIFF,
Yeah.
and I'm done.
Cool.
Yeah.
So we're just about out of time. So I have two questions for you. One is, if people want to, if they have questions or want to get in touch, what is the easiest way to contact you?
Oh, is that a loaded question? The best thing to do is to be able to, on questions and guidance, is one is we've got the ProSelect user group on Facebook. Join that group and put the questions out there. That, again, that's for ProSelect type questions. You're going to see some things more evolving with because ProSelect was always owned by Time Exposure. Okay.
Mhm.
Time Exposure is no longer. Time Exposure does not exist anymore, even though the domain is still out there, but it's going to be slowly going away. ProSelect is now Pro Studio Software. That what they say, you like the product so much, you buy the company, and that's exactly what I did, along with Graham, who's my partner, and he's our lead programmer and the guy who makes me look kind of stupid sometimes.
So I'll have that link in the show notes, the facebook.com/groups/ProSelect, say it, Lucy, ProSelect U2U, that will be in show notes.
Right.
And then, so emails or with questions about this, or
I don't.
Sounds like you're.
The problem is that I don't get into anybody that takes, and for the most part that contacts me with stuff, I always want to try and move them out into the public forum or back into ProSelect support system.
Okay,
because I spend my whole life trying to answer emails, and I can the ones that I've got. I mean, in the past I've always done private consulting. That's at ProSelectTraining.com. Right now, I'm not doing too much training because now that I own the company, I've got lots of other obligations. My wife is also a trainer, Carol. I've got another Maureen, another gal that does training for us. That they work with people. Obviously you do things.
So it sounds like the best place is that group to, if they have questions, thoughts, comments, need support for anything related to what we've talked about today, that there's a lot in the group.
Oh, it's a wealth of knowledge in it. And the thing is that it helps when you ask out there in that type of form, you're not only getting my knowledge, but you're going to get some other people. And if you have some other people that I think are wrong, I'm going to tell them that, So
yes.
I mean, to kind of straighten things out. But what happens out there in the world today with all of this stuff, that you really have to learn to be able to filter your information. There's so much bad information out there. People are, I see all these people I open up. I was looking at somebody the other day that running everything in 16-bit files. Why in the world do you need to run everything in 16-bit files? I've done 20 16-bit files, in my whole career, but yet somebody said, do 16-bit files and work in ProPhoto RGB, well, it's crazy. You can't print to it, and you can't do it. It takes up double your drive space. Don't work in, you in the labs are like, oh yeah, we take, Adobe 98 for your workspace. It's a wider workspace. Well, guess what? You can't print to it. So why do I want them? They're just going to convert it to sRGB when it goes on the back end. These are all kind of workflow type things. You have to kind of take and filter it. And
got it.
Look for somebody that does something stupid simple, and simple. That's me.
Keep it, instead of keep it simple, stupid, it's keep it stupid simple. I like that. Yeah. Okay, so my last question, Ron, and thank you so much for all this good, doable, and internally understandable thoughts, ideas, goodies. Looking for the right word. Anyway, so is there either some last thing that you want to make sure that you share that you haven't yet, or just sort of what you want to leave us with? So it's like your last word for today,
Well,
not forever.
I think it's important to let everybody know that even though I said I don't want your emails, that I and we do listen. That we're constantly out there, um, filtering information and seeing photographers. I work with, and I'm good friends with the top photographers in the world. And so I have a huge resource to be able to gather information from. And that what we're really looking at doing with ProSelect right now is a fantastic program. It's the only IPS software out there that was actually designed to do IPS. Everything else was something that started as something else, and they kind of moved into IPS because it was cool. It was the hot thing. And this
Mhm.
is what we're doing. We're constantly developing. And right now we're in the process of we're sketching out what is going to be the next generation of ProSelect. Graham and I are going to be taking the company to whole new levels. We're expanding the product line with different products that are going to be out there, and they're all going to be towards and dedicated towards IPS or workflow type products. And so
So what you're leaving us with what I'm hearing is it's important to communicate if you have some ideas or some needs, because it can impact the future of your program.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Great.
We have Trello boards. We use all kinds of Trello boards, and we have what we call a ProSelect wish list. And so, just today there was somebody in support that, was looking at, something and, can we do this? And I'm like, well, we can't now, but it's a good idea. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
I put it on the wish list, and these are all
Okay.
different things that we take that we consider, for future development.
Great. Great. Yeah. I um, got to sit with the developer owner of Nick Filters
Mhm.
before they sold. And I gave him some ideas, like doing sets and things where you can layer um, filters before you have to shut down. And the next iteration, they had that. And I'm so proud of myself for sharing that idea. So it's great to know that you're also, I mean, it is always evolving, I've noticed. So, well, Ron, thank you so much for being on the show. I know uh, we have so far 70 countries and 56,000 downloads of The Profitable Photographer. And I know every single one of my listeners has gotten so much out of this conversation. I really appreciate you, Ron.
Well, thanks so much. It's great to be here. It's always, you can see I have no problem talking.
Same here. And stay tuned for my wrap up, my little summary as people are listening. And so again, Ron, it's just been a really pleasure getting to have this just me time with you and then getting to share it. So yeah, thanks a
Thanks
bunch.
so much, Lucy.
Oh my gosh, I just love that conversation. And Ron is such a great teacher. And after we stopped the podcast, he so loves to help people that he walked me through a few questions and a few ideas that I had to suggest for what I would love to see. So don't hesitate to get into his Facebook group and communicate your ideas and ask questions, because he's a teacher at heart. So let's see, just a little quickie. He talked about how he's been doing in-person sales pretty much from the start. And in this conversation, we talk about his process of how he goes from emotional, then to logical, then to emotional to do his sales. And I asked him about whether he recommends or thinks it's a good idea to try to book a session before we meet for consultation. And he and I share the opinion on that you're going to want to re-listen to, which is basically that we want to prepare them, get them excited, but then also make sure we're a good fit and that they get all of the information before they say yes for many reasons. And we talk about that. And then I absolutely loved how he words the question if people are not happy with our pricing, or if you've changed your pricing or business models, what to say to clients. And I love that he likes to include his lawyer, his business advisor, and his accountant as the people who make sure that he is running his business profitably and having time for a life and family, and able to, just like our clients, have a successful, wonderful life. So that was awesome. And then we went into workflow and the importance of having a system that's simple, the importance of file management, easy retouching, and ordering process, getting it off to our labs. And he explains a little about how ProSelect makes that happen. So I'm super grateful again for this conversation with Ron, and feel free to reach out to him or reach out to me with any questions. All right, that's it for now. Sending you all a great big hug. Bye.
You have been listening to The Highly Profitable Photographer with Lucy Dumas. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please rate, subscribe, review, and share. To connect one-on-one and learn more about our coaching programs, just go to lucydumascoaching.com. Until next time, go have fun photographing and selling your work.